The morning sun stretched long shadows across Ethan Harper's front yard as he guided his wheelchair down the ramp he'd built 6 months earlier. At 54, with a shock of graying hair trimmed short, a remnant of his 28 years in the Marines, Ethan had settled into life in Willow Creek, a polished suburban enclave just outside Raleigh, North Carolina. He'd bought the single-story brick house with his VA loan, drawn to its flat layout and the promise of a quiet existence after decades of chaos. The ramp, a sturdy oak structure he'd crafted with his own hands, was his first modification, a symbol of his determination to adapt to a life forever altered by an RPG blast in Hellman Pro VYNCE that had claimed his legs and left him with a lingering brain injury. "Morning, Ethan," chirped Mrs. Lillian Carter from across the street, her terrier, Pip, tugging at its leash and yapping at a passing squirrel. "Your garden's looking like something out of a magazine." "Eitan flaset agin wavine but." "Thanks, Lillian. Just added some new lavender yesterday." These small exchanges, once trivial to him, had become lifelines in the wake of his injury. Connection was his new mission, and he'd been steadily forging it with the people of Willow Creek. The garden was his sanctuary. Where he couldn't feel the earth under his feet, he could still sink his hands into it, coaxing life from the soil. He'd spent months researching native plants, black-eyed Susans, bee balm, milkweed species that thrived with little fuss and drew pollinators to his yard. It wasn't the manicured perfection of Willow Creek's standard lawns, with their identical boxwoods and weed-free grass, but it was alive, vibrant, a quiet rebellion against the uniformity around him. He'd even staked out a corner for a butterfly meadow, marked with twine and a modest Marine Corps flag fluttering beside Ida, nod to the life he'd left behind. As he reached for his trowel, a silver BMW SUV rolled to a stop in front of his house. Ethan's eyes narrowed as a woman stepped out, her auburn hair swept into a tight chignon, her navy blazer crisp against the morning light. Claire Donovan, the newly minted president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, carried a leather binder and an air of unyielding authority. He'd seen her at the last community meeting, her voice slicing through the room as she outlined stricter rules for curb appeal. "Good morning, Mr. Harper," she called, her tone polished but edged with something sharp. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Ethan straightened in his chair, brushing dirt from his hands. "Not all, MS. Donovan, what brings you by?" She crossed the lawn, her heels sinking into the soft earth, and opened her binder to reveal a stack of glossy photos. "I'm here about your property. Willow Creek has standards, as I'm sure you're aware. Your landscaping choices are raising some concerns." Ethan's chest tightened, a familiar pressure he hadn't felt since his early rehab days, when every task seemed insurmountable. "I've read the HOA guidelines. I'm within the rules. Section 6.4 allows for eco-friendly alternatives. This garden's designed to support the local ecosystem." Claire's lips pressed into a thin line, her smile more a formality than a gesture. "The board disagrees. We've had complaints your meadow doesn't align with the community's aesthetic. Section 7.1 mandates a majority of maintained turf grass in front yards." She handed him a formal letter, its edges crisp. "This is a notice of violation. You have 10 days to comply, or fines will begin." "Complaints from who?" Ethan asked, scanning the letter. "That's confidential," she replied smoothly. "But the board's consensus is clear. Your property detracts from Willow Creek's appeal." He glanced at the flag beside his garden. "And this? Does it bother the board too?" Claire's gaze flicked to the flag, her expression tightening. "Section 9.5 restricts flags to designated holidays. It's a minor infraction, but it's still a violation." Ethan's jaw clenched, years of discipline holding his temper in check. "I served under that flag for nearly 3 decades, MS. Donovan, earned the right to fly it on my own damn property." "Your Sarah VYC is noted," she said, her voice cool, "but rules apply to everyone. No exceptions." She paused, eyeing the ramp. "Speaking of which, that ramp hasn't been approved by the architectural committee. You'll need to submit plans or dismantle it." He stared at her, incredulous. It's how I get into my house. You're telling me it's an eyesore? There are subtler options, she said, unfazed. Something less conspicuous. Think about it. With that, she turned and strode back to her SUV, Leah VYing Ethan gripping the notice, the paper crumpling under his fingers. The sun felt too hot now. The garden he'd poured his soul into reduced to a bureaucratic footnote. He thought of the men he'd lost in Hellman, the folded flags handed to their families. What would they make of Thies's fight over flowers and a ramp in a manicured suburb? The absurdity stung, but so did the violation. Someone had drawn a line in Willow Creek's pristine grass, and Ethan Harper was on the wrong side of it. The next morning, Ethan woke to his phone buzzing on the nightstand. A text from his neighbor, Jim Kessler, a burly ex-firefighter who lived 3 houses down. Check your yard. Now, adrenaline surged through him, a reflex from years of waking to danger. He transferred his chair with practiced speed and rolled to the front window. His stomach dropped. The butterfly meadow was a ruins oil churned, plants uprooted, a chemical stench hanging in the air. The stakes and twine were scattered like shrapnel, and the Marine Corps flag was gone. Son of a bitch, he muttered, yanking a shirt over his head. He wheeled outside, the ramp creaking under his haste, and found Jim waiting on the porch, his face grim. "Morning, Ethan," Jim said, holding up his phone. "Caught this on my security cam last night. Thought you'd want to see it." Ethan took the phone, squinting at the grainy footage. A figure moved across his yard in the dark, pausing at the meadow. They worked quickly digging, spraying, then stood, clutching something small and square. The flag. A car's headlights briefly lit the scene, revealing a lanky young man with a familiar jawline. "That's Claire's kid, isn't it? Ryan?" Jim nodded. "Home from Duke for the summer. Been her errand boy around here tearing down unapproved birdhouses, painting over non-compliant mailboxes. Looks like he's stepped up his game." Ethan handed the phone back, his mind racing. This isn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This is vandalism targeted. "Claire's been on a power trip since she took over," Jim said. "Moved here from some ritzy place in Virginia. Thinks she's running a country club. Half the neighborhood's scared of her." Ethan picked up a splintered steak that would snapped clean through. "What's the play here, Jim?" "Police." Jim hesitated. "Could try, but Claire's husband, Victor, is tight with the sheriff. Golf buddies. We need more than blurry VY Deo to make it stick." "Then we get more," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "Document everything, talk to the neighbors, see who else she's hit. We're not rolling over for this." Jim grinned, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "Knew I liked you, Harper. Let's rally the troops." By noon, Ethan's yard had become a war room. Lillian Carter brought coffee and scones, her terrier sniffing the ruined soil. Sarah Nguyen, a nurse who lived next door, arrived with photos of her kid's swing set, dismantled after Claire cited it as a VY Sewell obstruction. Tom Bradley, a retired accountant, shared a story of a DULA 500 fine for a cracked driveway he couldn't afford to fix. A pattern emerged. Claire wasn't just enforcing rules, she was punishing anyone who didn't fit her VY shown of perfection. "We got a shot at this," Tom said, adjusting his glasses. "The bylaws allow a vote to oust the board president for misconduct. We'd need a majority, though." "Then we organize," Ethan replied, his tone resolute. "Tonight's the HOA meeting. We go in prepared." The Willow Creek Community Center buzzed with tension that evening. Ethan arrived early, positioning himself near the front, Jim and Tom flanking him. The room filled quickly, more residents than usual, drawn by whispers of unrest. Claire swept in, her tailored dress a stark contrast to the casual crowd, her son Ryan trailing behind her like a shadow. "Good evening," she began, her voice smooth as glass. "I'm pleased to see such engagement." "Point of order," Tom interrupted, standing. "Per Section 5.2 of the bylaws, I request an agenda amendment, subject to a vote." Claire's smile faltered. "There's a process, Mr. Bradley, and I'm following it," Tom shot back. "All in favor?" Hands rose across the room, a clear majority. Claire's grip on the podium tightened. Ethan wheeled forward. I'm Ethan Harper. I'm here to address a pattern of harassment by the HOA under MS. Donovan's leadership selective enforcement, unreasonable demands, and property destruction. He nodded to Jim, who passed out folders of EVY Denke. Last night, my garden was vandalized. My Marine Corps flag was stolen. Video shows Ryan Donovan as the culprit. The room erupted. Claire slammed her gavel, but the noise drowned her out. "This is outrageous," she shouted. "These are baseless accusations." "Not baseless," Sarah Nguyen called, holding up her phone. "Ryan tore down my kid's swing set too. I've got pictures. I've got emails," Tom added, threatening fines if I didn't repaint my house a board-approved color. Claire's face reddened. "Your garden was a blight, Harper, and that rampant's an eyesore dragging down property values. Your disability doesn't exempt you from standards." A stunned silence fell. Tom seized the moment. A move for a vote of no confidence in Claire Donovan for abuse of power and discrimination. "Seconded," Sarah said. The vote was swift, overwhelming. Claire was ousted, her exit marked by a furious glare and a hiss. This isn't over. The next morning, Ethan was prepping for a VA appointment when a black Range Rover pulled into his driveway. Victor Donovan emerged, a broad-shouldered man in a tailored suit, his face a mask of rage. Ethan opened the door, blocking the entrance. "Harper," Victor growled, "you've ruined my wife, turned this place against us." "Your wife did that herself," Ethan said calmly. "And your son trashed my property." Victor stepped closer. "You think you're untouchable because of that chair?" "I'm Victor Donovan, CEO of Triad Investments, ex-Army Ranger. I can bury you." He tossed an envelope onto Ethan's lap. "Do lost $75,000 over market value for your house. Take it and leave." "Not interested," Ethan said. Victor's voice dropped to a snarl. "Refuse, and I'll make your life hell. I've got connections, legal, financial, personal. You'll regret this." Ethan caught a glimpse of a holster under Victor's jacket as he turned to leave. Days later, as Ethan tended his replanted garden rebuilt with neighbors, help Claire's BMW reappeared. She approached, subdued, in jeans and a sweater. "I'm sorry," she said. "I let control consume me. Victor and I are done. He's been cheating for years. I reported his gun. He's got no permit." Before Ethan could respond, Victor's Range Rover screeched up. He stumbled out, reeking of whiskey, and drew his pistol. "You've taken everything," he roared, aiming at Ethan. Ethan wheeled forward, voice steady. "Put it down, Victor. This isn't worth it." Victor's finger twitched. The shot rang out, grazing Ethan's shoulder. As neighbors rushed in, Ethan tackled Victor, knocking the gun free. Jim and others pinned him until police arrived. A month later, Ethan's garden bloomed anew, a sign reading Harper's Pollinator Haven at its edgy a gift from the community. Victor faced prison. Claire stayed, humbled, helping with a communal garden. Willow Creek had shifted, its strength not in rules, but in its people. For Ethan, it wasn't just a house. Anna Maria was a home. One through a fight he'd never expected, but one he'd never backed down from. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.